The Justice Department has this new fund that was announced today, $1.7 billion. Why should taxpayers pay for the January 6th rioters? Well, it's been very well received. I have to tell you, I know very little about it. I wasn't involved in the whole creation of it and the negotiation, but this is reimbursing people that were horribly treated. It's anti-weaponization. They've been weaponized. In some cases, imprisoned wrongly. They paid legal fees. They've gone bankrupt. Their lives have been destroyed, and they turned out to be right. It was a terrible period in the history of our country, and the Justice Department has been working on it very hard. There have been numerous other occasions over the years where things like this have been done, but these were people treated brutally by a corrupt system run by corrupt people, and now they're being reimbursed for legal fees and everything they suffered through. That was Donald Trump defending what critics are calling a taxpayer-funded slush fund for January 6th insurrectionists. But let's remember exactly who these people were. These were not tourists casually walking through the Capitol building. These were individuals who smashed windows, assaulted police officers, chased lawmakers through hallways, and attempted to stop the certification of a democratic election. The images from January 6th shocked not only America, but the entire world. Officers were beaten with flagpoles, barricades were torn apart, and crowds stormed through the Capitol chanting threats against elected officials, including the Vice President of the United States. And now, years later, the conversation has shifted from criminal accountability to financial compensation. Donald Trump pardoned more than 1,500 individuals connected to January 6th, and many of his allies have spent months arguing that those people were victims rather than perpetrators. According to critics, the administration's newly announced nearly $2 billion settlement fund could become a mechanism for rewarding those loyalists financially. One name that immediately surfaced during the controversy was Andrew Paul Johnson, a man reportedly pardoned by Trump after January 6th related charges, who later committed horrifying crimes involving 2 children in Florida. Prosecutors said Johnson told one of the victims that he expected millions of dollars connected to this compensation effort and even promised to share the money if the victim stayed silent. Last week, he received a life sentence in prison. The case immediately intensified scrutiny surrounding the proposed fund and raised serious questions about who could potentially receive taxpayer money. During a tense Senate exchange, Senator Chris Van Hollen confronted Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche about the issue. Blanche, who previously served as Donald Trump's personal defense attorney, was asked directly whether individuals like Johnson would be excluded from any future payout structure, instead of giving a clear answer. The hearing quickly devolved into accusations and interruptions. Van Hollen argued that the administration had been signaling for months that it intended to financially support January 6 defendants. Blanche rejected the accusation, claiming the senator was misrepresenting facts and even warning him about lying to Congress. But critics say that exchange revealed something much bigger than political arguing. According to opponents of the plan, this isn't simply about compensation. They argue it's about creating long-term loyalty among a movement already willing to engage in political violence. The concern being raised by analysts, journalists, and former military officials is that rewarding January 6th participants financially sends a dangerous signal that political extremism can eventually become profitable. One of the loudest voices making that argument is Kris Goldsmith, an Army combat veteran and founder of Veterans Fighting Fascism. Goldsmith described the proposed fund as one of the most dangerous political developments in recent American history. According to him, the nearly $2 billion figure is not random. He argues that if thousands of January 6th participants each received large settlements, many could walk away as millionaires overnight. Goldsmith believes this creates an entirely new threat landscape. In his view, a percentage of those individuals could become even more radicalized, more organized, and more politically aggressive. He warns that extremist groups connected to January 6th, including organizations already investigated by federal authorities, could use massive financial resources to expand operations, recruit supporters, and prepare for future confrontations. He also pointed toward groups like Turning Point USA, which face scrutiny over transportation efforts tied to January 6th rallies. Investigators previously examined how buses and coordinated travel arrangements brought thousands of people into Washington on the day of the Capitol attack. Goldsmith argues that if organizations or activists connected to those events suddenly receive huge amounts of money, it could fuel future political unrest rather than heal divisions inside the country. Another concern raised repeatedly by critics is the symbolism behind the proposal. Opponents argue that describing these payments as reparations or restitution fundamentally rewrites the historical narrative of January 6th. To many Americans, the Capitol attack represented one of the darkest moments in modern democratic history. Police officers suffered injuries, government institutions were disrupted, lawmakers feared for their lives. The idea that participants could now receive taxpayer-funded settlements feels deeply disturbing to those who view the riot as an attempted insurrection. Supporters of Trump, however, continue pushing a completely different narrative. They argue many January 6 defendants were overcharged, unfairly prosecuted, or politically targeted by the federal government. Conservative media personalities and pro-Trump activists have spent years claiming the Justice Department weaponized investigations against ordinary Americans whose primary offense, they argue, was supporting Trump politically. In that narrative, the settlement fund becomes a correction for government overreach rather than a reward for extremism. That divide highlights how January 6th remains one of the most emotionally explosive issues in American politics. To one side, the rioters were violent extremists attempting to overturn democracy. To the other, many participants were patriotic Americans caught inside a politically motivated prosecution campaign. Those two completely opposing realities continue shaping every debate surrounding the event. Goldsmith also argued something else that many observers find particularly chilling. He said Donald Trump historically does not reward people out of sympathy or generosity. Instead, he believes Trump sees political supporters as tools for maintaining influence and power. In Goldsmith's view, financial compensation is not about gratitude. It's about ensuring loyalty moving forward. He warned that some recipients could potentially reinvest money into political extremism, weapons purchases, militia organizing, or aggressive activism aligned with Trump's political movement. Others, he said, may simply funnel money back into Trump-branded businesses, merchandise, fundraising campaigns, or future political efforts. Either way, critics argue the result is the same, strengthening a movement that already demonstrated willingness to challenge democratic outcomes through force. The legal foundation behind the proposed settlement is also facing intense criticism. According to reports, Trump previously filed massive claims tied to alleged damages caused by investigations, tax document leaks, and prosecutions connected to his presidency and post-presidency legal battles. Critics argue those damage claims were wildly inflated and lacked evidence supporting the enormous financial numbers involved. Former Justice Department officials, including former pardon attorney Liz Oyer, have described the arrangement as potentially corrupt. Oyer reportedly characterized the situation as a dangerous conflict of interest involving Trump and individuals who previously served as his personal lawyers but are now operating inside federal government positions. Critics believe this creates the appearance that Trump is effectively negotiating settlements with allies positioned inside institutions meant to independently oversee justice. Questions are also emerging about how the American public may react if billions of taxpayer dollars are ultimately directed toward individuals associated with January 6th. Polling over the past several years has shown that Americans remain deeply divided over Trump himself, but large majorities consistently viewed the Capitol attack negatively. Many Americans who watched the violence unfold live on television still remember the fear, chaos, and uncertainty of that day. For them, the possibility of seeing those same individuals receive massive payouts feels almost impossible to comprehend. Families of injured police officers, lawmakers who hid during the attack, and election workers who later faced threats argue that rewarding participants financially would send an incredibly dangerous message to future extremists. At the same time, Trump's political base continues viewing him as someone fighting against powerful institutions they no longer trust. That distrust extends toward federal law enforcement agencies, intelligence organizations, mainstream media outlets, and even the court system itself. In that environment, narratives about weaponization and political persecution resonate strongly among supporters who already believe the system operates unfairly against conservatives. As America moves closer toward another election cycle, debates surrounding January 6th are clearly not disappearing. Instead, they are evolving into even larger questions about democracy, accountability, political violence, and the future of American institutions. The controversy surrounding this proposed settlement fund sits directly at the center of that conflict. Critics warn it normalizes extremism. Supporters argue it corrects injustice. Opponents call it a slush fund. Allies call it restitution. But regardless of the language being used, one reality is undeniable. The political battle over January 6th is far from over, and the consequences of how America ultimately interprets that day may shape the country's future for years to come.